Hello and welcome back. This is the week 13 lecture. So today we will continue on with argument. We started on this writing strategy last week. I covered some key terms and concepts. We got some definitions down. So we'll continue to do a little bit more of that this week. I have a few new concepts to introduce, a few things to understand. But then towards the end of today's lecture, I want to start talking a little bit about Essay 4. Obviously, we are getting near the end of the semester. We only have a few weeks left. So I want to start talking a little bit about our upcoming schedule and, of course, our final major essay, which is an argumentative paper. So we're going to have a chance to illustrate or demonstrate all of the skills that we've been building beginning last week, continuing on through this week and next. So let's start by just kind of reviewing very quickly some of the stuff that we talked about last week. We discussed claims, right? Debatable statements, controversial or debatable statements that can spark some kind of an argument. So we talked about the difference between claims and statements of fact. We like true statements, we like those statements of fact, but they're not argumentative, right? We talked about that key distinction. A claim is debatable. That means some people are going to disagree with it. Some people will hear that claim and they will take the opposing viewpoint. They will take the opposing side. And that's a good thing because then we can have an argument, then we can try to get something done. Because keep in mind, arguments are productive, at least they can be. And they certainly can be in the academic context. Maybe some everyday arguments that we engage in or observe don't seem terribly productive, but certainly we are trying to accomplish real goals with our argument. So we talked about that a little bit last week as well. We talked about some of the different things we can try to achieve through argumentative writing. We can try to win agreement, right? We can try to get our audience to agree with us, to agree with our position, with our claims. That's always nice. That's what most people want to do with their arguments, but there are a couple of other options. We can also look to achieve compromise, some kind of middle ground solution with our opponents. That can also be a clear goal that can get something done. And then finally, we can want to compel action. We can want our audience to actually do things or not do things based on our argument. And remember, those goals do not have to be mutually exclusive. So we can try to win agreement while also compelling action on the part of our audience. So we always have a larger goal in mind. So that's all the stuff that we kind of started with last week. And then we talked about support. So we can't have claims without support. We talked about the need to support all of our claims, to ground them in some kind of evidence, some kind of factual basis. So we talked about the two levels of support. We have reasons, which are often provided by the author, by the arguer, and then we have the actual hard evidence, which is often referred to as inartistic appeals. So we talked about some of these different kinds of evidence, and we find a lot of this evidence through research. And that's something we'll talk about next week because remember, there is a research component to Essay 4. So we talked about stuff like numerical evidence, statistics, or testimonials, anecdotes, extended examples. We can find all of those through research. So those are inartistic appeals, and they can often function very successfully as evidence. So when we pair reasons and evidence, we're usually going to have the support that we need to make our claims work. So remember, we talked about the inartistic appeals, and again, that's largely evidence that already exists that we're going to find through research. And then we also talked about the artistic appeals, pathos, logos, and ethos. Those are the strategies that writers come up with themselves, writers or speakers, whoever it is that's making the argument. They are going to be using or creating those artistic appeals. You create those yourself, whereas with the inartistic appeals, you are finding them. That work has already been done, and you are often finding it through research. So those are all ways to support our claims. And obviously we want to do that ultimately in our body paragraphs. Once we get to Essay 4, we're going to be introducing claims at the beginning of most of our bodies, and then we're going to be providing the necessary support for those claims throughout the bodies. So we'll talk a little bit more today about structure. That's actually what we're mostly doing today, is we can start thinking about argumentative structures, ways to organize some of this stuff. So I'm going to give you guys two different sort of organizational models, two different structures or frameworks that you can use when you're building your own arguments in Essay 4. And the first sort of structure or framework should be very familiar already based on what we were talking about last week. So if you look in the week 13 overview, I've provided notes on all of this stuff. So take a look first at the Tolman model. This is the first model or structure that we want to look at. This was created by a British philosopher named Stephen Tolman. And his whole thing was he wanted to create an argumentative structure that really captured the way regular, everyday people make arguments. He thought often in school, right, we got a little bit too abstract and academic with the way we approached arguments. And he really wanted to simplify and create a structure that really could work in almost any argumentative situation, whether it's formal or informal. So he identified three key components that he claimed every argument, if it was a successful argument, every argument would have. And we already know some of these components. We start with claims, right? That's obviously part one. We start with original debatable claims. So that's the top layer, an original claim, usually delivered in the form of a declarative sentence or maybe a couple of sentences. Okay, so that's step one. Then step two, we have what Tolman labeled as data. And we can think of this in a larger sense as evidence, or even larger, we can just think about this mostly as support, right? This is the evidence that's going to be used to support the claim. And again, sometimes evidence can be found in other sources. In other cases, evidence might be generated by the author. But one way or another, there has to be data, there has to be evidence to support the claim. So those are kind of the two most basic levels, and we've already covered those. So again, get comfortable with that sort of two-part structure. Claim on top, support for that claim in the form of reasons and evidence right underneath. We've already kind of looked at that, and that's the basic sort of argumentative structure that we're going to be using throughout the next few weeks. But we can add that third component that Tolman identified as well. And this one's kind of weird. We have to take a moment on the third component and make sure that we understand it. So the third level of the Tolman model, beneath claims and data, the third level is warrant, what he called the warrant. And this one's a little bit strange because it often remains unstated. It often remains unsaid. So the warrant is what Tolman called a general sort of hypothetical statement that serves as a bridge between the claim and the support for that claim. So in other words, this is a statement that has to be accepted by the audience in order for the relationship between the claim and the evidence to really be clear and work. So it's a little abstract, but again, these aren't necessarily statements that authors are going to make directly in writing or through speech. These are just things that they're kind of assuming that the audience agrees with. General statements that they assume the audience sort of agrees with, so the entire argument can kind of flow and work. So he thought these warrants were really important bridges or connecting links between claims and support. And again, they're often left unsaid because they can kind of be assumed or inferred. It's sort of like we're all on the same page. We think we don't have to spell it out. But if the warrant is not shared, if the author believes in it, but the most readers or most of the audience members don't, then of course the whole argument will probably fall apart. So just a quick example here to kind of see how all of this stuff works in action. A little mini argument that I could use, structuring it, along the lines of the Tolman model, starting with a claim. College tuition in the U.S. should be free. That is obviously a debatable statement. A lot of people will not agree with me about that. Some people will, some people will not. So I know it's debatable. I know it's controversial. It's an original opinion of mine that I'm going to hope to prove as true, or at least possibly true. So my audience can either agree with me or at least acknowledge my argument as valid. Like we said last week, they don't always have to agree with you on everything, as long as they acknowledge your argument as possible, logical, and valid, potentially valid. So that's my claim. College in the U.S. should be free for all U.S. citizens. Okay, so next I have to provide some data to support that claim, obviously. So I have a lot of choices here. I might want to use some numerical evidence, right? Some statistics that sort of show tuition increases over the last few years. I can maybe put those side by side with, cost of living stats to kind of show that it's getting tight financially for a lot of people. But I could also use testimonials or anecdotes. I could talk to people, right? I could interview college students, or I could find interviews with college students. I could find articles written about this. I could talk to people who have experienced this, and I might be able to use their own words. That would be testimonials. That's another type of inartistic appeal. Or I might even sort of tell their story, kind of summarize it, put it in my own words, use their own experiences as, an extended example. And that would be an anecdote. Again, we like examples. Examples are good types of evidence. So I could provide all kinds of different data, and I would probably want some different kinds. Maybe some stats, maybe some testimonials, and maybe a couple of specific examples as well. Okay, great. So I have my claim, and now I have some evidence to support that claim. But now we get to that third level. Let's look at the warrant. Okay, so this is something that I'm not going to state directly, but I'm going to hope that my audience believes it, or they share this belief with me. So in this case, the warrant would be something like, we should remove obstacles to higher education, or higher education is valuable and more people should pursue it. You see, that's a really general, broad statement that I hope my audience agrees with. Because if they don't think higher education is worthwhile, if they don't think more people should have access to higher education, then my claim and my evidence aren't really going to work, right? We need, my audience and myself, we need to share a belief in the value of higher ed, and we need to share a belief that it's just basically a good thing that more people need to have access to. So if they share those basic assumptions, now they're going to be able to, sort of be open-minded about my claim and my evidence. But if you have people who are sort of hostile to higher ed, or they don't think it's worthwhile, then the argument falls apart. There's no connecting link from my claim, which they might not accept, and my evidence, which they might also not accept. So the whole argument ceases to work. So that's kind of how a warrant works. Often unstated, but it's an assumption that you want to share with your audience, so they're going to accept certain claims and certain types of evidence that you provide. Okay, so that's the Tolman model. Just get used to that, because again, as we start to build body paragraphs in Essay 4 in a couple of weeks, we need to just keep that basic structure in mind. We start with claims, we provide support for those claims, and then we keep some warrants in mind. Those might not necessarily find their way into our papers, but we need to be thinking about them. And again, at the top of body paragraphs, we're going to be introducing claims, we're going to be establishing original claims, and then over the course of the rest of those bodies, through most of the bulk of the body paragraph that you're writing, you're going to be providing reasons and evidence. So the Tolman model kind of gets us thinking in a nice, organized way as we get ready for Essay 4. The other structure that we can look at this week is the Rogersian style of argument. So this comes from an American psychologist named Carl Rogers, who was interested in finding ways to have more productive arguments. He made an observation that I bet many of us have made in the past. A lot of arguments don't go anywhere because the two people arguing will get too angry at one another. So they're not really listening to each other. There's no real give and take. Nothing is being accomplished. Nothing is being learned. There's no possibility for compromise. And you just get two people who are increasingly agitated. And that's usually how it ends. So he wanted to create an argumentative structure that would sort of get rid of the anger. It would get rid of the accusations, get rid of the misrepresentations that often happen in arguments. So the whole idea with the Rogersian style is we are seeking compromise. We are seeking some kind of middle ground between our position and our opponent's position. So this is, depending on your personality, this is a good option to consider. Like I said, a lot of people view arguments as sort of conflicts or something akin to war or a fight or like a sporting event where there needs to be one winner and one loser, and that's fine. I mean, that's a pretty traditional way to think about argument, to think about argumentative writing, and to be honest, that's largely how we teach it. At most levels of school. We teach arguing as kind of like a combat sport. You want to have strong arguments, right? You want to have forceful, strong claims, strong evidence. You want to sort of attack your opponents, show why they're wrong, and ultimately win the argument. So it's all kind of militaristic, and that's fine for a lot of people. There's nothing wrong with approaching arguments in that way. But if you don't think of yourself as a very aggressive person who kind of seeks out conflict, and I hear this from students every semester, they're like, I don't really like to argue. I don't think of myself as being argumentative. That's okay. I mean, you have to be somewhat argumentative in Essay 4, but it's okay if you're not necessarily viewing the argument that you're in, the larger debate, that you're participating in about your topic. It's okay if you're not really viewing it as like a combat kind of situation, like a winner and a loser. You can seek compromise. You can look for middle ground, and the Rogersian style is a way to do that. So we can just kind of run through it very quickly. Once you've introduced your topic, what's different about the Rogersian is you start by summarizing your opponent's viewpoints. And this is actually a very nice thing to do, just in general, even in everyday arguments. When you're arguing with somebody, try to explain to them or show them that you understand their position. So that's what we're doing here. We are summarizing our opponent's position based on what we know, based on what we understand about their position. We are summarizing it, putting it in our own words. Because what Rogers pointed out, I think it's very true, is often in arguments, one person will accuse the other person of taking their words out of context or misrepresenting what they said. Oh, that's not really what I meant. Or, oh, I never actually said that. You're making that up. That's not fair. Right? That's often how arguments get derailed. Because one person might, get some things wrong about the other person's argument, and then that irritates the person who feels like they're being misinterpreted, and then that leads to more anger, more frustration, and we're not being productive. So the idea here is before we get to our own position, before we get to our own argument, we're going to summarize our opponent's argument. We're going to make it clear that we have read what our opponent has to say, or we have listened, we understand it, we respect it. We're not trying to misrepresent it. We're not trying to take it out of context or twist the meaning, right? We're trying to accurately capture what our opponents are saying, what our opponent's argument really is. Okay? Great. So once we do that, and we sort of, the next step is to kind of have what's called a statement of understanding, which is to sort of acknowledge the parts of your opponent's argument that you might actually agree with, or the parts that you don't think are totally wrong. And again, this is how the compromise begins to happen. You can say, hey, I don't agree with everything, but A and C and E are good points. And I think, we can come together on these particular points. So that can just be a statement or two, couple of sentences where you really make it clear that you are at least open to certain parts of your opponent's argument. And then you get to the statement of your position. Then you can really articulate your own argument. So now you're laying out your own claims, your own evidence, which is what we're mostly doing. So again, you're not going to necessarily follow the Rogersian, throughout your entire paper. You might just do it once, right, in like one body paragraph or in a couple of body paragraphs if you want to respond to opponents. And this can be a very effective strategy because you can kind of create a dialogue between you and the opposing side. But again, by having that statement of understanding come before your own position, you're at least keeping the option of compromise open. You're showing that you're willing to maybe meet in the middle. And then you lay out your position, your claims and evidence, and then finally you arrive at a conclusion that is kind of that compromise solution. Right? You've gone through their argument, you've gone through your argument, and by the end of the Rogersian structure, we're trying to meet somewhere in that middle ground where we can, find a solution that maybe both sides can live with. So that's not mandatory. If you would rather just stick to the Tolman, stick to argument as war, that's fine. But if you are more sort of compromise-minded, and if you like to sort of work with people instead of always fight with people, the Rogersian might be effective for you. Okay, so the final thing I want to do today is just really talk about Essay 4 a little bit. We have several weeks to work on it, obviously, but I want to kind of get you guys at least thinking about it this week. We're not ready to start working on it necessarily, but we need to start thinking about how we're going to get started. So there is sort of a particular process here that we need to follow in order to get moving on Essay 4. So this is different from all of our previous essays where I just really gave you guys total freedom to choose your own topics. You can still choose your own topics with Essay 4, but we are going to be working closely with one of the essays in our book, in 50 essays. So step 1, as you start thinking about Essay 4, step 1 is to select an essay from the book that you would like to work with. Okay, so this can be an essay that we have read as a class. This can be something that I assigned, something that you wrote a discussion post on, or it can be an essay that we never got to. We're only reading a pretty small sort of fraction of the overall essays in the book. So there are a lot that we haven't read. You can maybe find something on your own that interests you. But the goal is to find an essay that you like, an essay that, again, you're interested in, an essay that you think is sort of thought-provoking. And you're going to basically identify the argument that is being made in that essay. Because one thing we'll notice, all of the essays in the book are making arguments. Now, some are classified. If you look at the various tables of contents at the beginning of the book, we have a lot of different classifications, if you remember that writing style from a few weeks ago. But one of them that you might find useful is the essays are all organized by method of development, I think is what they call it. That just means the different writing strategies that we've been learning: narrative, comparison, process analysis, and you'll also see a category for argumentative essays. So you can start there. You might want to take a look at the essays that are classified as argumentative. We're reading a few of them for class. So you'll see the Malcolm Gladwell essay that we read last week. You'll see the 2 assigned essays for this week, but then there's also some other stuff that we're not going to have time to read as a class that you could potentially use. But also, even if the essay you want doesn't fall in that argumentative category, it's still almost certainly making an argument, even if it's a comparison, even if it's a process analysis, even if it's a narrative. They're all making arguments. They're just doing it in, different ways, different styles. So this really is a multi-step process. Before you can start thinking about your own argument, you have to identify the argument that's being made in the essay that you have selected. Okay, identify the topic, and then identify what your author is saying about the topic. Okay, so what's the essay about, and what position, what argument is the author making about that topic? And once you've identified that, you need to decide if you agree with the author's argument or if you disagree. Or do you fall somewhere in the middle? Do you fall somewhere in between agreement and disagreement? And then you can start to build your own argument. So in some cases, you're going to be agreeing with the author, but you still need to add something new to the argument that the author of that essay is making. So you can either be opposed to the author or you can be on the author's side. Or again, you can be somewhere in the middle. But no matter what, you have to generate original claims, original evidence. You have to build an argument of your own. It's okay if it's similar to the argument being made by the author of your chosen essay, but it cannot be identical. There has to be something unique about yours. You have to bring something new to the table. Okay? And eventually, once we've had time to go through these early steps, we can start researching. Because see, the topic of the essay that you choose, that becomes your topic. Right? And that's the topic that you will ultimately research and learn a little bit more about. And the process of research will probably help you to arrive at some more original claims. And then again, we're going to build our arguments with claims and evidence of our own. Okay, so you can get started. You can get started on this stuff. Go ahead and pick an essay. Look through the book. Look through the table of contents. Pick an essay that you would like to work with. And of course, if you've already read something that you really liked and you'd like to return to it, you can do that, but you're not just going to be able to recycle an old discussion post. You obviously need to write a lot more for essay 4, and I want to see original stuff. Okay, I don't just want you to repeat stuff you've already done. Okay, so think about what essay you want to use. Again, it doesn't matter if we've read it as a class or not. Just pick something that works for you. Pick something that's interesting for you, something that grabs you, something that you have some opinions about, right? Because you need to get argumentative ultimately. So you need to have opinions. You need to be able to build an argument. So keep that in mind as you're making your selections. Okay, and then next week, I'm going to try to schedule video conferences for you guys. This can be a little bit hit or miss for online classes. Obviously, we don't normally meet. I know a lot of you have busy schedules, so we can treat the conferences as more or less optional. I'll schedule a time for everybody. Of course, we're doing these through Zoom. I'm doing these with my live classes as well. Those of you who can attend, those of you who want to attend, so you can start kind of working with us, working with me on essay 4. We can talk about essay 4, your topic, your argument. Maybe you have some work already done that we can look at. But it's not mandatory. I can't really make these conferences mandatory in an asynchronous online class, but I will schedule them in week 14. So that's not this week. This week is a short week because of Thanksgiving. But next week is conference week. So take a look in the module. You'll see that at the beginning of next week. I'll have the conference times posted, and you can attend if you want to attend, if you're able to. Also, if you need a different time, you can let me know, and we might be able to find something else that works for you. But that's what we're going to be kind of doing during the week, hopefully. And then next week's lecture, I'm going to talk about sort of how to maybe start annotating the essay that you've selected, how to do some of those early idea generation activities, that early pre-writing stuff to get you up and running on essay 4. And also next week, we have to talk about research. So I'll spend a good chunk of lecture giving you some research tips so you guys can spend time in week 14 and week 15 researching your topics, finding some sources, finding some evidence, some of those inartistic appeals that you'll be able to use later as support. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you next week.